next part of the video. As we pick back up with I am a Holy One, one of God. Uh-oh, what is that? Oh, I'm going to have to return to that break. Hold on. Really want to get into the final question. We're going to eat up this break and the next break with it, that I want to ask today when it comes to, we asked earlier, is there a God? We determined yes. We asked which? We determined the God, the one and only God of Abraham, who sent his son, Jesus, so that we could be reconciled to him. So once we do that, now what? What? What's next? Where do we go from here? This is the question I want to ask. Seriously, this is the question I want to ask, and the reason that it's the question I want to ask is because when we ask where do we go, what does God want from us, what is expected of us, there's a few answers to that, a few valid answers to that. I'm sure there's many more that maybe aren't valid. But when we look at it, it becomes this thing of, okay, what's God want from us? Well, he wants us to be obedient. He wants us to be safe. He wants us to be loved and to love him, to be loved by him and to love him. He wants us to be good to each other and united together in serving him and each other with compassion. You look at all the other quote-unquote deities, and most of them, man, they call for horrible things, like you should be a martyr, or you should condemn people, or, I was trying to think of some of the more, outlandish stuff, but then I'm going to get into also, if you look at the stories of a lot of the Greek and Roman, and trying to remember which ones, because there's a couple that I actually specifically read some stuff about. The Norse mythology, Greek, Zeus. If you read their writings, the people who believed this, Zeus was the king of gods. That's what they believed, the king of the gods. And then they had a whole bunch of other ones that controlled little things. And if you read the stories about their gods were cruel and saw them as saw humans as playthings. And if the humans played the game just right, maybe they could come to be like the Norse gods. If you play the game just right, if you kill enough people, if you're violent enough, if you're terrible enough, if you're a badass, you can come be in Valhalla. Our God says, if you ask and you submit to love, to loving people, to loving everything, to living in the love of God, the just, true love of God, we'll come reside in you. John 17, the second section where he talks about disciples, the final section where he talks about all those who will believe on their, on what they have to say. He speaks about, he's asking the Father, Jesus is speaking to the Father, and he says, Father, I want them to be united with me as I'm united with you. Me and them, you and me, all united with us in the Spirit. He calls for us to be united with him. And then he says, when he talks about the sheep and the goats, he says, when he tells the righteous people, you've done all this, go get your reward. And when he speaks, I believe in the Sermon on the Mount, to being kind to those in need and taking care of the orphans and widows and etc., he tells his followers, if you do these things, I and my Father will reside in you. We will come and be in you. You can have a unity and a oneness with the Lord when you act in that way of loyalty. The beauty of it is I don't have to get it perfect to be his complete, obedient servant. I don't have to get everything right every moment of every day to be good enough for God. I just have to be moving, trying to move in his will. And the more... Okay, we're back. That was... Sorry about that. Bridget called. My grandchildren's mom. She's not actually my kid. Her and Linnea were best friends growing up, and we love Bridget. Don't get me wrong. She's not actually my kid. She's just a wonderful girl with some wonderful kids, and boy, do I love those kids. All right, so, and she called because she was trying to get a hold of me about maybe having the kids over this weekend. We're going to talk about I am a Holy One of God, and we're going to be in Romans for a couple of these. We'll start in Romans 1:7 here in the next audio break. Try to anyway. Here we go. Okay, there it is. Ooh. Zach Williams here on God'sLoveLive.com with Chuckles in the afternoon. What a beautiful afternoon. Oh, the recording didn't start. Got to try that again. Let's try that again. For some reason, why isn't it recording? Very odd. Try this again. Zach Williams with Less Like Me here on God'sLoveLive.com with Chuckles in the afternoon. What a beautiful afternoon. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're enjoying the music. I hope you're staying safe, happy, and healthy out there, man. How's it going? What's going on? Email us. Tell us all about it. Chuckles at God'sLoveLive.com. You can also text 814-651-8865. You can text us at 814-651-8865. I say us, but it's just me. That's directly to my cell phone, my personal cell phone. And if you text me, I will try to answer whatever questions or comments or whatever you might have. So we are talking about I am a Holy One of God, just now getting started on that. Because even though what are we at? We're like an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 17 minutes into our video, and we're just actually getting into this I am a Holy One of God because of all of the ranting I did before. I know, we went off the rails, but it happens. So we're going to talk, and we're going to look at Romans 1:7, and then after that we're going to look at Romans 8:27, and we're going to move to 1 Corinthians and a couple of places in Ephesians if you want to kind of get some of that ready. But we're going to start with Romans 1:7. And Romans 1:7 says, "To all who are loved by God and called to be his holy people, grace and peace to you from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ." To all those in Rome who are called to be saints, it says in the English Standard Version. What else do we have? We have saints, we have holy people. That's pretty much it. Saints are holy people. And again, I want to talk about the fact that our discovery prior to our commitment and submission begins the process of getting us to the point of getting ready to be a holy one of God. Then we submit, we commit, we enter into covenant, obediently being baptized. I think that's it's a must. I'm not saying that if you weren't dunked, you're not going to heaven, but what I am saying is that you should, out of obedience, do that because we are told to do so. And then we become, and I love the fact that we just came out of the song Less Like Me, Zach Williams. because we become every day less like our sinful natured, selfish selves and more like saints of the Lord. And we're able to be saints because we have been purged, we have been forgiven of our sins, which is the next point we're going to talk about. This is why I do these, this is why we end up talking about all of this like all the time, because I am forgiven of all my sins, which is the next point we're going to talk about. We have some stuff in Matthew, Luke, a few things in Acts to talk about when it comes to that. We're actually going to talk about Colossians here in a minute. And when we talk about Colossians here in a minute, we're going to do 3:12 of Colossians for this. 3:13 is actually part of the next. So I might do both of them when we get to the Colossians part here in just a second. But right now in Romans 8:27 it says, not Romans 8:7, Chuckles, Romans 8:27. It says, and he who searches hearts knows what is in the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. The NIV says, and he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance to the will of God. In the NLT it says for the believers, for us believers. Most of the translations are saint, and again I really like that translation of it, because we are saints. Oftentimes we talk about the saints, Saint Christopher, Saint this, Saint that, Saint the other thing, and we think about this. These are people who they did something extraordinary or special, and when we talk about saints here on earth, when the Catholic Church talks about saints, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about people who did something extraordinary, of course. But also, we are saints. We become the saints because we do something extraordinary if we embrace the identity that we have been given by our Master, by Christ. Then we are saints of God as well. If we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, we'll look at that one. 1 Corinthians. Sorry, I'm doing this on the computer, and I make noises sometimes when I do that. And it's verse 2 of chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians. To the church of God in Corinth, to those sanctified in Jesus Christ and called to be his holy people. In the NIV, saints in most of the others. The NLT also has holy people. Called to be saints and holy people. We are holy ones of God. And it's repeated over and over again. Ephesians 1:4. You go to chapter 1, verse 4 of Ephesians. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. Those of us who follow God's will, those of us who work our way into the identity of Christ that he has shared with us. That's why I think the Isaiah 61 mission, that we have to go back and look at that. Our identity stems from that mission of Messiah that he shared with us. We did an entire video series about that one. Ephesians 2:19, consequently you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his households. This also goes back to I belong to a city. I'm a citizen of heaven. I am part of the kingdom. I am new creation. We become fellow citizens with the saints. We are no longer foreigners and strangers to God. We become fellow citizens with God's people in new creation, in the kingdom of the heavens. And finally, of course, we're going to go to the Colossians. There's one in Ephesians 5:27. But we're going to go to Colossians this time. And we are going to go to verse 3. And we're going to talk about chapter 3. And we're going to talk about verse 12. And we're actually going to move into I am forgiven in verse 13 of this Colossians statement. Okay, so Colossians 3:12. Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. This actually shores up and supports a couple of things we've talked about. Put on then, as God's chosen, holy, and beloved, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience. That comes from that second, that shares with that 2 Peter discussion, where add to your faith kindness, to your kindness compassion, to your, I forget, then brotherly affection, mutual affection, brotherly love, etc., etc. And if you have these in increasing numbers, if we have, or in increasing levels, so if we have these traits of followers of Christ, of the holy ones, in increasing measure, then we become as the Lord has been, and then we are instructed also forgive the way the Lord has forgiven you. So I am forgiven of all my sins as the Lord has forgiven me. I must forgive everyone else as the Lord has forgiven me. And in verse 14, I'm actually going to read verse 14 and 15 because they actually make great sense to me. And above all else, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony, and let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Yeah. Back to the music, Denise Williams. Okay, we're going to be in, I forgot to tell the radio group, but we're going to jump back to Matthew, and then we're going to go into Acts. So if y'all want to get Matthew 26, chapter 26, verse 28 ready, that's where we're going to be in the next break. Oh, hold on. I gotta do something here real quick. Ding, 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 ding. I didn't realize. Try that. Let's see where that gets us. Okay. Andrew Rip. Andrew Rip, Roses here on God'sLoveLive.com with Chuckles in the afternoon. What a beautiful afternoon it is. We're going to be in Matthew 26, verse 28 here in just a second. The recording didn't start again. See, I don't know why it's doing that, but it's doing it often now. That's Andrew Rip, Roses here on God'sLoveLive.com with Chuckles this beautiful afternoon. I hope you're having a great afternoon. I hope you're enjoying the music and staying safe, happy, and healthy. We've got Phil Wickham coming up, Meredith Andrews, Matthew West, and so much more. I do want to get back into, we're going to be in Matthew 26, 28. But I want to get back into I'm forgiven. I want to, one last thing on I am a holy one of God. On that statement, I'm a holy one of God does not mean that I am done. I am a saint doesn't mean I'm done. It means he recognizes me as a saint. He recognizes me as a holy one. Why? Because I'm covered in the blood. But it also means that I need to work into that identity. Again, all of these pieces of our identity in Christ that I've been talking about, it is a work to get into them, and it increases every day. And that's the qualities we were talking about in Colossians there just a few minutes ago in the last break. Having those qualities in increasing measure definitely affects how we line up as a holy one of God. Now, I do want to say, I want to iterate as often as humanly possible, it is work. And part of our reward for the work that we're doing in becoming more and more creation beings, part of our reward for that is going to be more work. You know that, right? That's one of the things that as this process for me started, the God's Love Live thing started 3-4 years ago. as I started working in it, I realized that the more that I understand, the more work I'm called to do, up to the point where I started doing this, up to the point where I'm doing little to nothing else outside of this in order to make this a reality, in order to share the gospel. That being said, I do want to remind you that you can go to godslovelive.com and click donate. I keep getting told by some of my people, Claire and Letitia and a couple other people, like, man, you need to tell people, like, this is all you're doing. This is it. I have, as we were told so many times, I've put all my eggs in this one basket of serving the Lord, trusting that He will provide for us opportunities. And it will be opportunities, by the way, just so you understand it. When God speaks of His provision for us, He will give us what we need. But He will do so in a way that we can earn it by following His word and working in His will. It's not like I started serving God and suddenly my bank account just had, $870,000 in it. Nope, I got to work. I got to work every day, and I got to work outside of what I'm doing here. Not just these videos are part of my work. It's my favorite part of my work is to sit and talk about this and kind of work through it, because it's just having such an effect on me. It's why I tell you guys to pick something, and I use Psalm 8 a lot. I use Psalm 107 a lot. I use, what's the other one? Psalm 22 a lot when I'm having any kind of discouragement. I read those scriptures, but go find one that touches you the most. Jeremiah 7:13 is one that I know for my son Bobby is very, very special because of the effect it had on him before. So, work in that. And know that you're going to get to work, and know that if you do a good job, you're going to get more work. Matthew 26:28 says, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." It does not, in any place, and if you can find it, show me, there's nowhere where Jesus says that His blood is poured out, that He's sacrificing, that He's offering grace for specific sins. If you don't hear, this is where you're going too far. And so we've had conversations about the unforgivable sin. And I heard years ago, as a young man, I heard suicide, the unforgivable sin. And to me at the time, I was like, wait a second. Because basically, I could see a situation where somebody who wanted to, I guess I can't say that word, I should say unalive themselves, because I might get edited if I say it the other way. Somebody who wanted to unalive themselves and be done, maybe takes a bunch of chemicals or medication to try to make that want a reality. And while they're sitting waiting for it to take effect, they realize how terrible and how wrong the thing they just did was. And they go to the Lord sincerely, earnestly saying, "I'm sorry, Lord. Please, Lord, save me. I'm so sorry." But the EMTs don't come in time and they die. Were they forgiven? As one of a ton of ways that I can kind of turn that around on you. So I just, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next break. Grace Upon Grace, Matthew West coming right up. That is amazing that song is the one that comes up after the comments I just made. I love that song, Grace Upon Grace, Matthew West, because it speaks so much to the truth. It really does. Yeah. I don't know, man. I am for sure trying to keep these videos short, but it just keeps getting harder and harder to do so. Mainly because, well, quite frankly, it's so important. This is such a critical thing. I had this conversation with my wife the other day because I was like, listen, you see somebody who isn't saved, doesn't have salvation, hasn't embraced the grace that Christ offers us. Whatever. You see that. How do you hold it in? That was that song I was talking about earlier with the words. How do I keep it in? How do I keep it in? We were talking yesterday. I was talking to somebody yesterday. We were sitting around talking. Oh, it was Larry Jr. and Wade was there. A couple other people was there, and I was like, listen. I said, this family thing. We talk about family. So for me, it's God, family, everything else. That's the priority. God, family, everything else. And when I talk about family, I'm talking my family. Well, who's my family? I might as well say neighbor. I might as well just say people, God, people, and everything else. Because, well, let's put it this way. God, all the other holy ones of God, my family who are all co-heirs with Christ, and then the third priority, all of those other people who have yet to understand what he offers and to embrace it. So our family, our Christian family, and the other people who aren't in the Christian family yet fall only under God. God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, by the way, but under God. And the reason, and I'm not sure where the two groups of people would fall in the priority list. I want to say that other believers, other followers of Christ, would be second only to God, and then the non-believers, the unbelievers, third. But in some ways, in some places, non-believers are actually even a little more critical than the believers, because they need to know the grace of God. Not because I love sinners or the enemy more than I do our own co-heirs, but because somebody who's a co-heir, they already have the love of God. They already have some knowledge of the love of God. They've already committed, even if it's not fully and properly. I want to help anybody in that position. If you're somebody who, yeah, I love God and I want to be in God's kingdom as long as I don't have to run out of gas or risk losing the car or maybe go without a cup of coffee or whatever your priorities are, because there are people that they have that. I want to serve God, but I get that there's a limit here. My limit doesn't exist. If serving God calls for the loss of my life, then it calls for the loss of my life. The only real way that the enemy has to actually have any real foothold when it comes to me are other people. Believers, unbelievers, whatever, but other people, because I see what the enemy does to these people, and it's very hard for me not to let my gorilla out and give him his sledgehammer when I see people I care about hurting. All right, let's get back into this break here before I run out of time. Meredith Andrews, can anybody hear me here on godslovelive.com with Chuckles in the afternoon? What a beautiful afternoon it is. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you're enjoying the music and staying safe, happy, and healthy. We're going to talk about in the next hour Acts 2:38, Acts 13:38, Acts 26:18, Ephesians 1:17. We already talked about Colossians 3:13 in the last break when we were talking about Colossians 3:12. We are going to hit Hebrews 8:12, 10, 14, and 18, 1 John 1:9, and 1 John 2:12. We're going to try to hit most, if not all of those, coming up in the 2 o'clock hour, so stick around. Right now, it is Casting Crowns metal cover by James Franchise of Praise You in This Storm here on godslovelive.com. Okay. Oh, I see what I did. I messed it up there. Aha. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What did I do? Oh, I think I got, okay. I think I managed to salvage it, but we'll see. I didn't have it set up to, so when I, so some of what I said the radio folks are going to miss because I didn't realize that it had switched and it wasn't playing. Things happen. I was talking earlier about this Paul and Silas being beat. I want to get back into that here in the video real quick. I'm not going to take too long because I want to get back into what we were doing earlier, but I'll probably finish up this part of the video because we have, oh, we're there actually. So we're gonna go into the next part of the video.